You're here in Japan this time regarding the children's lawsuit concerning children's health and safety, and also demanding the government to actually evacuate all the children out of Fukushima. But the Japanese government has not considered the standard level or the safe level of radiation in Japan, and they said that it's okay to, they've been saying that it's okay to play around outside, and they have not considered any mass evacuation out of Fukushima. What do you think about that?
We do feel that the Japanese government is quite wrong, criminally wrong in fact, not to organize the evacuation of at least children and probably also adults from areas where the radiation levels are high, the contamination levels are high. Now, with regard to that, the governments are never an organization. They always consist of individuals. And it's the individuals in those governments that make decisions, that these decisions are wrong, and they fail to act on that, then there are such things in the past as war crimes. In the case of the Second World War, of course, Hitler decided as a government, the National Socialist government, that they could put the Jewish people in concentration camps and gas them. These were all decisions made by a government, but ultimately an individual is responsible. And although those were considered to be war crimes, to my mind this is equally well a war crime, although it's happened in peacetime. And these people who are individually responsible and can be named, I mean, I don't know what the names are, but these people exist. Ultimately, I think they may have to face some kind of trial that would result in them going to jail for a very long time.
The Japanese government has adopted ICRP standard model, but at the same time, it hasn't actually followed or it hasn't actually kept the ICRP warning. You have criticized the ICRP model. What your stance on that toward the Japanese government?
Well, in a sense, the government has remained within the constraints that laid down by the ICRP, because I believe that the ICRP permits up to 20 millisieverts exposure in emergency situations, and clearly this is an emergency situation. The normal acceptable limit is 1 millisievert, but this is from all sources, and most interpretations of this, for instance in the United States and in Europe, reduce that down to about 0.1 millisievert for exposure from a single source. But anyway, whichever way you look at it, the Japanese government has permitted people already to be exposed to higher levels than 1 millisievert. And my own belief, having done these air filter experiments, is that probably a very large number of people will have been exposed higher than 20 millisieverts from internal radionuclides. The Japanese government is completely out of order in making the decisions that it's made. And as I said in the last answer, if it continues, now that it has this information from the ECRR model and from the measurements that we've made, it continues to pursue this course of action, then I believe that it's acting in some criminal sense, in some sense as a criminal organization, and ultimately will be brought to justice in some way.
You said that there is a difference between ICRP
between the actual
and
models, yes,
there is
a difference, yeah.
Could you explain that a little bit, why it's...
Okay. Well, the first thing you have to know is that the ICRP model doesn't work. So if you predict the number of cancers after an exposure to internal radionuclides, you get the wrong answer. Well, the ICRP model was set up in 1952, and DNA wasn't discovered until 1953. The ICRP was set up in order to look at the health effects of the radiation exposures from the manufacture of atom bombs. That's what it was for. Because after the Second World War, there was a massive expansion in the manufacture of atom bombs, and plutonium and uranium and all these substances which were like normally not there were being released all over the place. So the ICRP had to quickly figure out how to deal with this. And so the way in which they did it was take a physics-based approach. So they're mostly physicists, because it was physicists who do this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And to a physicist, what you do is you reduce everything to the simplest format
Right.
in order to get a mathematical equation. Because you can't write down a mathematical equation about a person, it's too complicated. So what they did is they turned a person into a bag of water. And then they said that the exposures had to be regulated on the basis of the amount of energy that was transmitted into the bag of water. It's kind of simple.
Right.
It was very easy to do that. It's a very simple model. You have a bag of water in the shape of a person, you put a thermometer inside it,
Yeah.
you fire radiation in it, and you see if the temperature goes up.
Right.
And that enables you to define absorbed dose.
All right. But the model actually is ICRP because it's promoting, or from their point of view, from their promoting the promoting nuclear energy, nuclear power plants.
Well, they wouldn't say no. They wouldn't say that they're promoting anything. They would
Right.
say that they're an independent structure of scientists who independently assess the risks from radiation. They would never ever say that they're promoting nuclear power.
Right. But
It's just how it happens. It's just how it works out. This all happens behind the scenes. Actually, I mean, many of us believe that they were originally set up to promote nuclear weapons, or rather not to promote them, but to prevent people from stopping their development. That's what it was about. So all those people who said, oh look, you know, there's all this strontium-90 in the milk and little Jimmy's got leukemia, they could say, well, it's nothing to do with the nuclear weapons because we can tell you that the doses are too low. That's what it was originally about. And when the doctors started to complain about this, what they did is they constrained the doctors. So in 1959, they forced the WHO into an agreement with the IAEA, whereby the IAEA was responsible for radiation and health. The International Atomic Energy Agency was responsible for health. And the WHO, the World Health Organization, was not allowed to think about radiation. It had to think about mosquitoes and stuff, you know, and AIDS. Yeah. So there was a quite clear distinction there. So that was almost proof, if you like, that it was that the ICRP was there to kind of like control the understanding of risk, and they still are. That's still where they are.
And is that why the standard, their model is set up not to
Look at internal radiation.
their safety level, right?
Yes,
It's
sure.
not.
I believe so. Of course, they would never admit it.
Right. I just wanted to ask you about your past experience with testifying in court in similar cases. You said that you have testified more than 40 times, maybe across the world.
Yes, I've done quite a few court cases in which I've used the ECRR model to act as an expert witness for people who've been harmed by radiation exposure, internal radiation. A number of different examples in the United States, people who worked with radioactive substances, people who lived near a nuclear power station, people who lived near a nuclear site in Los Angeles was one. And in the United Kingdom, I'm an expert witness on a number of court cases and tribunals relating to veterans of the nuclear atomic testing.
Right. That's right.
Now, all of these, what they all have in common is that these people have suffered, developed cancer or leukemia, and this was following the internal exposure to exactly the same sort of substances that we're talking about here in Japan. And in every one of those cases, we have succeeded. And so, so if you like to see it as a sort of a boxing match or some kind of contest between the ICRP and the ECRR, I have to say that if you put that in court with a jury or with an unbiased judge or with a tribunal of 3 judges, they always find in favour of the ECRR interpretation and never in favour of the ICRP. And indeed, the defence in all of these cases have singularly failed to bring any expert witnesses into court to testify that the ICRP model is right. Because actually it's really quite difficult to testify that it's right, since all of the evidence shows that it's wrong. And in a court, you rely on the evidence. So it's no good saying, hey, this is the ICRP and everybody believes it, and look at this guy, he's the head of the ICRP and isn't he important and all of that stuff. Because in court that doesn't cut any ice, you know.
So if you had a chance, and if the Japanese plaintiffs invited you to, the Japanese plaintiffs
In the Koriyama case.
in Koriyama
Yeah.
case invited you over to testify.
Right.
Would you do that?
Well, I'm quite happy to testify and produce a report on
Right,
this
right.
as an expert witness. And if I were going to testify, I would want to testify by video link. I absolutely don't want to go anywhere near this, because having seen what I've seen about the radiation levels, I'm too frightened to go closer to this site than about 100 kilometres. And even 100 kilometres I'm not too happy about. I was in Eizu Wakamatsu, and there was a significant amount of radioactivity on the ground there, which I didn't expect.
Right.
I've been quite shocked by the amount that I found here. And I noticed it this morning. I sat down in the hotel and I'm looking out over Tokyo, and everybody's going around their business, people with umbrellas and young women and men with all their white and so on. And it looks perfectly normal.
Right.
And at Eizu Wakamatsu it looks perfectly normal. Probably if you went within 5 kilometres of the actual accident site, it would look perfectly normal. You wouldn't see anything. But actually what you have there is an enormous amount of radioactivity and a lot of particles floating around the place that can kill you, and you just can't see them.
Right, exactly.
And you don't know that they're there, because you don't have eyesight that see radioactivity, and unless you carry a Geiger counter, you can't measure it.
Right.
And even if you carry a Geiger counter, you can be misled by the fact that it's saying so many microsieverts per hour, when in reality what the problem is nothing to do with the microsieverts per hour. It's the stuff that produces the microsieverts per hour that's floating about in the air, and then it goes inside you. So this is when you know this, you don't want to go very close to these places. A lot of my colleagues are dead. They went to Chernobyl.
We would like to ask you the results from your car filter experiment.
Okay.
Just briefly mention that. And
Okay, so I have to say that first of all, this is quite this is just preliminary results. We have had we've looked at 5 car filters. 1 of them from Chiba City and 4 of them from somewhere along the 100 kilometre mark. But 1 of them drove within 30 kilometres of the plant. And what they show is that all of the Fukushima ones show higher levels than the Chiba City one.
Right.
But the Chiba City one still is quite high. So and they all contain gamma emitting isotopes, which are certainly from the plant. And the evidence is also that they contain uranium, but it's a little bit more difficult to be sure about the uranium. In addition to that, one of the filters we tested for alpha particles, and what this shows is that they do contain alpha emitters, and at least 1 alpha emitting particle, which was about 0.5 millimeter diameter. So that's what we found. We are also, of course, they are still being analysed with more sophisticated equipment to look for plutonium, and we'll know about that in a couple of weeks' time. So then the question is, what does that mean? It means, basically it means that the concentration in air of cesium-137 is about 1,000 times higher than it was at the top of the nuclear weapons testing in 1963.
wow.
Okay? So that is really quite serious, because we know that the nuclear weapons testing in 1963 caused an increase in infant mortality and caused a cancer epidemic 20 years later.
Right.
But this is 1,000 times higher than that. And in Chiba City it was 300 times higher than that. So the ratio is about 3 to 1, which makes me feel that probably there are significant radioactive exposures to the south of Tokyo, so further away even. Yeah, the final thing that we seems to show is that the radioactivity is not uniformly distributed. We kind of knew that anyway, but this confirms it. So there's some areas where it's quite high, some areas where there's not very much of it. And this is exactly like Chernobyl. So if you look at maps of the contamination on the ground from Chernobyl, it's rather like a leaf shape with lots of lobes coming out, and they tend to go along river valleys. So that's what we found there. And now, so what do we do next?
Right.
Well, what has to, a number of things, but the first thing is that people who live in these areas where the radioactivity is high, where these air concentrations are high, should leave. And in particular, the children should be got out, because children are up to 10 times more sensitive to radiation.
Right.
And of course, they're not going to suddenly die, but all of this stuff's going to happen sometime in the future. But it certainly is going to happen. So it is already an assault on these people in a sort of legal sense, and they should get. But if they get out now, then it won't get any worse. Right. Yes. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the government must urgently overfly the area and produce accurate radiation density maps, which is old technology.